Welcome everybody. We are filming a series of talks as a part of the AEO centenary this year in 2021. And so my name is Carina Bauer. I'm the CEO of the IMEX Group and the Vice Chair of the AEO. And I'm delighted to have been invited to interview our AEO Chair, Simon Parker. So welcome, Simon. It's great to see you.
And likewise.
And let me just give everybody a quick intro. I know you don't need an intro, but for those who don't know you so well, let me just tell you that Simon started his exhibition career in 1990, so 30 years ago, at Montgomery Exhibitions, where he worked on IFE and Interbuild, and where he met his wife, Rachel, who also now runs the AEV, so I'm sure many of you know her. Simon then moved to Blenheim in 1997. He worked on a range of events. Blenheim, as many of you will know, became Miller Freeman, and then in numerous other guises until they finally settled on UBM, which was sold to Informa 2 years ago. Simon has been running the UK for UBM and launched a range of events over the past few years in South Africa, Nigeria, India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the UAE. And in terms of AEO, Simon's been involved with the AEO for the last 10 years, sitting on the council, co-chairing the events group, and now obviously chair of the AEO. And for those not aware, Simon left Informa at the beginning of this year, and so can be very focused on the AEO and other projects in the event sector that maybe you can tell us about.
Yep.
So welcome, Simon. I'm going to kick off straight away with just talking about the AEO in its centenary year. It's a great opportunity for the organisation to look back. Not many of us can look back quite that far.
Yeah.
What's your earliest memory of the AEO, and what's your funniest or fondest memory?
Yeah, I mean, it's fond rather than funny, because there are a number of those. But it's funny, isn't it? Because you mentioned the 30 years, and I feel like a bit of a crusty old git, having been in the industry for that length of time. But I do remember distinctly back in, it must have been around at that time. And during, it's all about the awards ceremony. And so you always sort of midsummer, all of the grown-ups within the business, because I was still in short trousers at that time, used to go off to the AEO Awards, and there was a real sense that it was a meeting of the industry and also of the great minds, and that they got together and they really talked about the strategic issues and did all of that. And little did I know what actually happened there, and I subsequently found out. But it really was a badge of honor if you got to go to that awards ceremony. And I eventually did. And I think the only reason I did was because somebody dropped out at the last minute. So literally on the day, I got to go to it and thoroughly enjoyed it, and didn't talk about any strategic issues, and had a few drinks and enjoyed it. So, but I think what you saw there, and what is really key, and what the AEO obviously wants to do is create this real focal point for the industry. A real sense of celebration and pride in that industry. And I'm sure you've been to lots of awards ceremonies, some of which are great, others people don't necessarily care so much about. One thing with the awards is people really care. They're passionate if they win, they're equally passionate if they don't. But that is what you want to do as an organization, and I think that for me sums up the pride that we have, the passion that we have, the great people that we have within this industry. And that was brought home to me, I think, many, many years ago in the dark and distant past. But then the fondest bit for me was quite recent, and I was hoping that you were there, you might have been, but it was when Jane Risby won but by the look of your face you probably weren't.
I wasn't. No.
So it was 2 or 3 years ago, and she won the contribution award, and she did this. I don't know how well you know Jane, but for those people that don't, she's incredibly creative, incredibly funny, and incredibly passionate, and all of those things came over in her acceptance speech, and it was a perfectly crafted speech based on the Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
so she and the way that she managed to do that was great, and I just thought that she was, one, very funny, two, very worthy of the award, and three, it was a very memorable speech.
Well, it's so funny that you bring up the awards, because actually my fondest and earliest memory of the AEO was also the AEO Awards. And we had entered the award, I think IMEX in Frankfurt had been going about 3 years, and we'd entered one of the awards, didn't expect to win. So it was just myself and my father on, like a side table. We didn't bring the team because we just didn't expect to win. And we hadn't really told the team that we'd entered. And Dara O'Brien, I think, was giving out the awards that year. And I didn't know who he was. He was, brilliant. And so fun, and we were kind of just going, what's happening, and it was such an amazing memory. And the following year we brought the whole team, and the awards ceremony, I mean, I guess it just shows the community that we have
100%
around the AEO. It's just so strong, and like you say, it was such an amazing achievement for us to win. It just gave us such a high to get that recognition so early on in the business. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and you remember the Dara O'Brien bit and the people that spoke, but ultimately it is about the awards themselves, and we've won a couple, and when we did, the uplifting sort of sense from the team, and I mean, it's brilliant. So long may they continue, and I look forward to. I mean, one of the things that obviously we're talking about is what that will then look like this year. And obviously that's dependent on where we get to with COVID, but and it's obviously highly unlikely that's going to be in the summer in its normal guise, but the likelihood is there will be a party towards the end of the year to celebrate centenary and also the award winners.
Yes, and we're all looking forward to that. Well, that actually, this year has been an unprecedented year. So how do you sort of look at that in terms of the role of the chair? It's been an odd year to have taken over the chairship at the end of 2020. So how are you sort of looking at that role?
Well, in a way, I mean, often, and I'm not saying this is true of the chair of the AEO, but they're more ceremonial roles and figurehead roles, whereas this year, I think more than any, it's not been that, and therefore it's been more rewarding. I'm still only sort of 4 months into it, but at the same time, it's been 4 months of action and 4 months of talking to members, engaging with members, and really trying to find a pathway through obviously these crazy times that we find ourselves. So I think it's been very unique, a unique set of circumstances. As I said, more rewarding in many ways. And I think one of the things that I will take from it is obviously the fact that the industry has come together more than I've ever known it in all the time. And I know that, lots of people have said this, but, if there's ever a time for an association to step up, it's now. And also for an association to represent, its widest constituents, and if you look at, the fact that we have represented, from the small to the large organizer, but also the fact that we've engaged far more with the venues and with suppliers, and you've seen that, I know, and the dialogue and the partnership approach, and again, the partnership approach has been talked about a lot, but one of the, I hope, legacies of this awful mess is that we will, in the future, those partnerships will be stronger, and we will realize that interdependence between those three sort of constituents, if you like.
I totally agree, and I've seen that. Obviously we represent as IMEX the business events industry, and I've seen that happen right across the entire global business events industry as well. I guess in a way it gives an organization true purpose when a crisis like this takes place, and true purpose for that partnership as well. Obviously the AEO over 100 years has changed. I'd be interested in your views of how you believe the AEO's changed over the years, but then in particular as a result of this COVID crisis.
Okay, so I think in terms of change, what I've seen very that's really been brought home to me over the last sort of four or 5 months is the level of engagement at grassroots level within membership. And I think, Chris said that in terms of the number of working groups and the engagement, I think, the working groups themselves, whether it'll be, the technology group, the ops group, there is the diversity inclusion group now, sustainability, there's so many different working groups. I think they've had something like 47 meetings in the last 6 months, involving 283 people. So, that is fantastic, because I think the AEO, sort of going back 5-10 years ago, was more of a select group of people, and that usually the same people that tended to look the same. Whereas now, in terms of the composition of both the council, but also those working groups, it's a far more representative group of what we do. And that, I think, long may that continue. We obviously, we shouldn't be complacent, and there's lots more work that we can do. But I think that is the biggest change that I've seen. The things that I think that is changed very significantly in the last sort of 6 months or a year has been our approach to lobbying. It has to be, because the biggest frustration for, most of the members and people that are watching this is the fact that, we feel that we've been discriminated against in the sense that other sectors have been treated differently, namely theatres and retail, and why are we not being treated in the same way? And also, whether then we could have impacted that more. Could we have, I guess there's a view that we kind of hid our light under a bushel a little bit, and we didn't say that, the industry was worth 9 billion, that it employed, over 50,000 people, etc., all of the stats that we now know. And were we as vocal as we could have been with that? And the answer is probably no. And therefore, one of the things that we therefore need to be thinking about is how we maintain the momentum that we've built with government, and ensure that, we are seen as a vital component to GDP, that, the multiplier effect of what we do is massive to the economy, to local economies. And how we get that message across is obviously something that, we've done, I think, successfully. But we can certainly do more of in the future.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, obviously, the lobbying aspect has been massive for the organisation this year and will be so important going forward. I think that's something we need to remember when the good times do roll back, that we're not forgetting that actually having a seat at that table is so important in any crisis situation. And so, with that, if we look forward, say 5 years, where do you see the industry in 5 years' time?
Well, I think it will fully recover. I genuinely, I have to be. I mean, today I feel actually really quite positive, and I don't know why that is. It's a number of conversations I've had with people. I spoke to people in the US and also UK organisers who were seeing a little glimmer of hope. And again, it'd be interesting to hear how you're seeing things. But things seem to be getting better. And obviously, there's a long way to go. But at least, we can see the green shoots, if you like. I do think fundamentally that, our industry isn't broken. Our industry will survive and flourish. And I think that is down to the fact that people want to meet, people want face-to-face, they want to transact together. And, we talked about it before the interview started. And, we were talking about online education. And you can replicate certain parts of that, some of the content that you can do online, but you can't replicate that coming together, that social aspect of either going to school or, in that instance, or what we do, which is create those moments for people and those connections that are long lasting. And that, that trump the digital. I mean, there's been a massive amount talked about virtuals and the digitization of our business. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that won't be a really important component. But the core of what we do, which is that face-to-face, is a human requirement, is a human need, and one which will sustain our industry. And I am sure will make sure that we return stronger and bigger and better.
Yeah, I totally agree. We are also seeing those green shoots. I mean, we're planning our show for November, and we're seeing people really confidently signing contracts and committing. And I think it's not that the situation isn't bad now. It's just that we can see that light at the end of the tunnel, and people are desperate to come back together. It's interesting with the digital because there's so much you can do, but you know, whenever I go onto a digital conference or trade show, my overriding feeling is it's so alone and quiet because I'm just here alone in my office at home, and there's
Yeah,
a sense of sort of just a quietness about that, that
yeah,
is not what you experience at an in-person event. So I think it's very transactional online, isn't it? Which is
of
fine
course.
for some things, but it's
Yeah,
not a full experience.
yeah, and you know, it's obviously all of the organisers and everybody is thinking about how you blend those two things. But I think that, you know, there is a real pent up demand for that face to face, and when, you know, touch wood, we get that green light, then there is going to be a real, you know, sort of sense of relief. And I think, you know, it's, you know, I don't think for 1 second that as soon as we get that okay, then we're going to get to the same standards as we've had in terms of revenues and attendance. It's going to take a while. But I think that, you know, you asked over 5 years, and I certainly think by 3 to 4 years, then we'll be back to where we need to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's certainly what we're planning for as well. Now, just talking about yourself, Simon, and just looking back at your career, if you were to go back to your younger self 30 years ago when you were just
Yeah.
starting off in the business, is there any advice that you would give yourself?
Yeah, I'd probably study data. I'd be a data scientist, I think.
Yeah. And coding.
Yeah, and coding. Yeah. So, and that's what, not that I was necessarily disposed to do either of those things, sadly. But I think certainly, you know, those things and data, and, you know, we certainly for the first part of my career, it was more on instinct than data. And I think that now you need to absolutely marry those two things. There's always a need for instinct and good instinct and making the right decisions, but those decisions need to be informed by data. So I think most definitely that. And then also it's more of the, I think we all get into the detail, and it's more about actually looking at the horizon more. And, you know, again, I think given what, you know, we've been through, we've been really operational, but I would really advise myself to spend time thinking about, you know, what, you know, really is going to add value, and therefore more horizon scanning. Would definitely be two pieces of advice.
Do you think that's something that most people just learn over time as you go up through the levels in an organization, that you automatically get better at that? Or do you think that's something that should really be taught to people at all levels, really how to take a more strategic and less operational approach to their work?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you can't do that all the time. You know, you have to have a strategy and then you have to execute the strategy. So you need both. But I think that, you know, often people justify their existences by being busy.
Yeah.
And, you know, actually it's about the quality of what you do largely, and the decisions that come out of that. And you can only do that by really thinking through, you know, various scenarios.
Yeah, the busyness pandemic, maybe that's
Exactly.
that will be bigger than COVID.
Exactly.
Well, and then talking about horizon scanning, what is your vision then for the AEO in 2021 and beyond as well? Because I'll be following you, so I'd love to know what your advice would be as well beyond 2021.
I think, well, one, back to that industry recognition. So I think what we need to do as the AEO is to absolutely ensure that government and that we stand proud behind what we do and ensure that everybody is aware of that. So I think that, and I think, you know, that will then have really sort of positive benefits in attracting talent. So the other thing that we need to do is bring the best people into this industry. So I think the AEO needs to do that. I think, and something that I know that you're very passionate about, is we have a big responsibility in terms of the environment. and in terms of the footprint that we have and our sustainability. So we need to think about that. And then the last sort of pillar for me would be around diversity and inclusion as well, so that we have great people from wherever they come from, and whatever their ethnicity and their gender, and all of those things, I think will ensure that we're well placed to take advantage of everything positive from the future. So that, and the embracing of technology would be the key sort of tenets of what I think the AEO should be representing.
Fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree with all of those, and I'd be very happy to take the mantle from you and do my best to take that vision forward into 2022. So thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership this year as well. I know that all of the membership very much appreciates that.
Well, I appreciate your time and all the support that you've given as well. So thank you very much, Carina.
Thanks, Simon. And
see you later.
See you later.
Bye.